Megan. Yeah, I think we'll just keep going forward. I just won't get to look at you. Make it a little stranger than it already is, but I'll run through the agenda. If Megan can get it fixed, hey, Ben. Megan, get it fixed, all the better. If not, just maybe one of those issues we got to work through. So apologize for that. We'll try to get her set for the next time. Just so you know, Ben, something's wrong with the videos on our side in the settings for the webinar. So you're not going to get a video, your video to work, but your audio should work. And then we'll have to just update everybody as they come in here. All right. Appreciate y'all joining us tonight. Quite a few things going on. I know we've got a lot on our agenda to talk through. Starting off with the old business, I hope everybody got a chance to read the immigration policy, or at least take a look at it that I sent out to you. If you do want to make a comment, obviously I can't see you, so I'm just telling you it's perfectly fine. Just unmute yourself and interrupt me. I'm totally understand. It's just one of the challenges we're going to have tonight. So any questions on the immigration as I go through it, just pop in and ask. We know I sent this out to you for a reason. Obviously, with every election, we always have a discussion about immigration. It's been going on for as long as I can remember. It's a strong topic. People have a lot of different opinions. I've had several meetings with different people about our immigration policy. It has been really consistent through the years, going back several chiefs. So it hasn't really changed for the Appleton Police Department. We focus on our constitutional duty and applying that constitutional duty using our core values that we talk about a lot. I've talked about a lot with you: compassion, integrity, and courage. Our policy is I've actually had it reviewed just maybe a month ago at the most by the ACLU. I had some ACLU members that wanted to take a look at our policy. So I had a meeting with them for about a half an hour. I sent them the policy, asked for feedback from them. I haven't gotten any feedback, good or bad. The discussion that we had was very positive. They were very happy with how we approached immigration. Hi, Joy. I got a few of the videos popping up, so I think we're working now. Oh, excellent. I can see faces. Thank you, Megan. Hey, Elijah.
You're welcome. And it looked like there maybe Ben may have gotten booted. I don't know if he's there or not. He disappeared. So he may just have to, I can send him another invite or something on the back end here. So I'm not with my normal computer here, but I'll do my best. All right,
good. Looks like we're getting most of you on videos are up now. Awesome. This is going to be a long night, me talking to myself. I'm telling you, this is much better. Hey, Paul. All right. So the policy, if you got a chance to look at our immigration policy, it is formatted the way that most of our other policies are formatted. When I look at a policy, or when we put a policy together, one thing that we make sure we included in it is the why. The what is the policy itself, what we do, it's the procedures, the nuts and bolts, but the why always comes before the what. So when you look at our policy, our immigration policy, right on the first page under the policy itself, it talks about recognizing the dignity of all persons, regardless of their national origin or immigration status. The next paragraph talks about the why do we have this policy. It's to encourage crime reporting, cooperation in the investigation of criminal activity from all individuals, regardless of their immigration status. They must feel secure that contacting or being addressed by members of law enforcement will not automatically lead to immigration inquiry and or deportation. It's important that we make that statement out there for the public. We've been reaffirming that after the election. It's been something that we've been consistent on, like I mentioned before, for many years, and several chiefs. I had a great conversation with a friend of mine last Monday, a week ago. We went out for lunch, and this is a Hmong refugee who is now oh gosh, he's got to be in his mid-40s. But I met him when he was a young, troubled teenager in Green Bay. I was a young street cop, and I was doing some work trying to mentor the kids in the neighborhood that I worked, kind of the beat cop thing that community policing was what it was called at the time, but it's something that's just kind of evolved into what we do, how we do business. But I met him back when he was in middle school, and worked with him to try to keep him out of trouble. He did well for many years. He struggled a few times, but we got him through it. And he tried to teach me Hmong. And if you've ever tried to learn Hmong, it was the hardest thing I've ever tried to do in my life. And I've forgotten every single word that he taught me. But it was really a cool experience. So him and I have been friends for about 25 years. He lives in town now. He's got a couple kids, he's married, owns a house up on the northeast side. Just had lunch last week. First time because of COVID for a while. And we talked a little bit about the struggles that he had as a refugee, and the challenge he faced as a young Hmong teenager growing up in this part of Wisconsin. And he had a lot of really personal stories that touched me. So I'm very sensitive to the immigration issue. I think it is a extremely difficult and complex issue that can't be solved by one party or the other party that's in charge or in power at the time. We've seen that. I think it's just going to take a lot of collaboration and discussion, and a plan that's consistent instead of changing every 4 or 8 years. And again, our policy really reflects that. I'm proud of it because it reflects our core values. You know, it talks about compassion, integrity, and I've worked in a neighborhood where refugees and immigrants were afraid to call the police and were repeatedly victimized over and over again because they did not trust the police, because they were told by the gang members that were running the neighborhood that if they did call the police, we were going to bring in INS and deport them all. So they used it as an intimidation factor. So we had to get out and make sure that they understood that we did not do that type of work. That wasn't what we're sworn to do. You don't have the authority to do it, and that they needed to trust us to keep them safe. So that's our philosophy and our policy on immigration. So if anybody have any questions or comments or suggestions on that policy, go ahead and speak up. Okay, I'm going to do this pretty frequently with our policies. Send you ones that may be extremely important in the moment, or that there's some national or local discussion on. I think it's really important that the public gets our policies and that the public has input into our policies. That kind of leads into our next bullet point. We have not done this before, as far as I know, and Beth may be able to correct me on this, but we have now posted every one of our police policies on the web for everyone to see and view. It is on our website. You just go to our Green Bay or our Appleton PD website and look up policy, and you'll see the link for our policy manual. It is, like I said, over 800 pages long, but every policy starts off with a policy statement and the reason why we have the policy. So, for instance, if you have a family member or friend, or you have a contact with law enforcement on a traffic stop, or somebody tells you about an incident that happened involving a welfare check, or any other type of case that we would work, or crime, you can go to our policy manual and you can look it up, and you will be able to read why we have the policy and what the policy is. You'll be able to tell if the officers followed the policy or not. So I think that's important that we put that out there. The community tells us how they want us to do our job, so they should know what our policies are, and they should have input into what our policies are. So that is brand new. That just went out a couple weeks ago. Again, for transparency, but also for community to review and offer us suggestions if they have any. The next thing on our agenda, and I know several of you were actually part of this really exciting Imagine Fox City's Visioning Project, Policing in Our Future. There was the third part of a three-part series this last week that I was a panel member on for a couple hours. There is a link in the agenda if you want to take a look at the other two parts to the series. The first part was Dr. Ted Darden, who talked a little bit about community policing and the history of policing nationwide, going back to the start of our country and how it evolved. It was really a very informative presentation he did. I'm sure it was eye-opening to a lot of people, but you know, for us in law enforcement, we've studied it before, so we were familiar with it. But that was the first session. And then the second session was Chief Peterson from Grand Chute and Captain Dietzen from the Outagamie County Sheriff's Department. And they talked about the current state of policing in the Fox cities. And then the last session was Chief Graff, Jamie Graff from Kakan, and myself. We talked about the future of policing. Just got a text about. Oh, Joy, you want to ask a question?
Excellent, thank you. I was getting a message that said I could not unmute myself.
Oh, all right. Maybe you can take a look at that, Megan. Make sure that's not set too. Yes, go ahead, Joy. Sorry about that.
And so I'm sorry, Chief, because this is a little delayed because I was emailing Beth about the muted thing.
That's fine.
I am curious about the immigration policy, just as a, if you could give a real simple sort of explanation of what I just might not understand the terminology of in terms of the detentions part. I think I might understand the civil versus criminal immigration law, but there is a piece of this that talks about officers being able to detain people. And that was, I would just love a bit of explanation about that because I didn't feel like I completely understood it.
Sure. Yeah. There's difference between the civil and the criminal, like is mentioned in the detention part. The criminal is actually like a warrant. It is a warrant that is signed by a judge, commanding you to take that person into custody. Generally, it's because they have committed a crime, not just an immigration offense, but it's usually because they have either absconded from a crime they're being charged with or they're being charged with a new crime. So it's akin to an arrest warrant being signed by a judge. A civil hold is just a detention for an immigration violation. So those, we don't enforce those. We don't have the authority to enforce those. We don't even ask if their immigration status when you come in contact with somebody. Generally, the first time we ever hear about somebody's immigration status is if they get physically arrested for some charge or a warrant and they get taken to the jail, and the jail will ask them those questions as part of their booking procedure. But they're trained to enforce those laws. We're not. So we will not ask those questions. If you get stopped on a traffic stop or you're involved in a traffic crash or you're the victim of a crime, we won't be asking your immigration status. And if for some reason we have to run your name, if it comes up as a civil detainer, we won't enforce that. If it comes up as a criminal warrant, then we have to enforce that because that's signed by a judge. That's an order. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
And that's, I can tell you, it's very, very rare. Usually when you get the warrants, it's for somebody that's wanted for some serious violent crimes. That's when you get the warrant signed for them. So is anybody else having an issue on muting?
Chief,
Innocent. Go ahead, Innocent.
Yeah, I think some of the things that we should focus on sometimes is, saying some of the things, the good things that the officers are doing for the city. And I want to thank you for one of the officers, Sergeant Peters, for the work that she's doing for the refugee community in the city. She's been very supportive in sensitizing people and providing services to the refugee population. And I wanted to thank you for that, Chief.
Thank you, Innocent. She's I love all my people, but she's got a little special place. She's got a heart of gold. She really does. And then I'm going to talk a little bit. Actually, we've got a welcoming meeting for the refugees on April 10th. I don't know if you know about that yet, Innocent, but Carrie Peters is one of our police officers. She's a sergeant, and she has taken this on herself to be a mentor and a liaison for our refugee program. On April 10th, we're going to have another welcoming meeting for refugees. She does this a couple times a year. They'll come to the police department, and I'll meet them and talk with them, introduce myself. But then Carrie will do a presentation to them about our community, kind of a welcome to our community, and then kind of explain to them how policing is a little different here and what they can expect from us. Most of the refugees that we get are from the Republic of Congo. World Refugee, in the last 4 years, it was a different government. We were getting about 15,000 refugees in the United States a year. We were just told that now we can expect about 62,000 this year, 62,500 refugees this year. So that's an increase of 400%. The challenge that we have, talking with Carrie and the people at World Refugees. The challenge, World Relief. Yep. The challenge is they had to cut a lot of staff in the last 4 years because of the reduction in the number of refugees and because of COVID. And now they're going to have to try to build their staff up for support and resources very quickly with this influx of refugees. So we thought it would be a good time to have that meeting, invite in the refugees, start making those connections again. We'll have it here. We'll have everybody spaced out. We'll have masks and do it be as COVID friendly as we can, but we really need to have that meeting. So that's going to be April 10th. And that's going to be led by Carrie Peters and some other people from World Relief. But that's something exciting that we've been waiting to do for well over a year now. So appreciate that. The next thing on our agenda, many of you have reached out and volunteered for that crisis response team, volunteer for their advisory committee. I appreciate that. I sent out the email. I've got several people that have volunteered. I'm going to try to get those names to the chair people in the next day or two and have them decide how many they need. So I thought that would be a great way for the advisory board to have some involvement in a project that's really going to, I think, set the stage for some significant growth in the world of response to mental health crisis calls. But I also think it's going to set a template for re-envisioning how we do some things in the future in this community. We have been talking, and I know this is an old discussion that you've heard a lot, but we have been talking in law enforcement and policing how we have been asked to just do one more thing. Just do one more thing. Somebody has a need. Well, the police are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They can do it. And we have all these things on our plate, and we're not always the best to handle a lot of those issues. So this is one of those issues where I think we can move forward on incrementally. We don't want to make any drastic changes in how we respond to mental health crisis calls because we don't want to create another gap in an area like this because it is life and death. So we want to make sure that we're moving ahead thoughtfully, incrementally, and not creating or causing more harm. So this advisory group is going to oversee and make recommendations to this crisis response team. So I look forward to that. I will let the people know who gets selected for that. We are looking for, the last I was told, the chair people that are running this are looking for 8 to 10 people to oversee this project. So I will let you know as soon as I can if they select you. So I think 5 years from now, we're going to see much different types of services being used in responding to different types of calls. It won't be policing. I think it's going to look much different 5 years from now. And I think 10 years from now, I think it's going to look dramatically different. But we have to make sure we do it cautiously and thoughtfully. And this is the first step. So I think we're getting on the ground floor of something pretty exciting. I know there's not a lot more I can say about that. I kind of said a lot, probably said too much already, but anybody have any questions on that I'm able to answer? Go ahead, Eben.
Will there be cultural competencies and other things like that included?
Yes. That's part of this advisory board, is to have a diverse group. And we're hoping to get people that have experiences and backgrounds in training cultural competency to be part of that board, because we want to make sure that the operations and the policies that get put in place, we're not missing out on anything. We want to make sure that we're covering all our different ethnicities, sexual orientation. Martha was able to reach out to me and get somebody that would be a good representative for the homeless. We have a lot of contact with the homeless, so we should have somebody that can connect with us on that and advise us on that. So yes. Anybody else have any questions on that? All right, Megan just sent me a text that the mute issue should be resolved now, Beth, so we should be good. All right, I'm going to move to, nobody has questions on that or the refugee meeting. I'm going to move to the PowerPoint and talk a little bit about crime in Appleton. I did not get, if anybody sent me any requests on anything to cover, I didn't get any emails or requests. So the topic may actually be a little short, but I'm going to try to cover it fairly quickly here. You're going to have to tell me, Beth. Let's share my screen.
Yep, we can see that pretty family.
I'm trying to share my other screen. All right. Now, do you see the
No.
main slide?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
We can see your family again. Oh, there we go. We're all set.
All right. You see the main slide or you see the notes page?
Yeah,
You see the notes, Chief.
Okay, I just gotta switch the displays. How about that?
Now you're good.
All right, see? You can teach an old dog new tricks. All right, move this over to, get it out of your way there. Okay, so this is our, these are UCR numbers. So this is just a whole lot of numbers, but basically what I'm showing you is the last 25 years of crime in the city of Appleton. These are numbers that are based on our FBI Uniform Crime Reporting statistics. So these are numbers that the FBI puts together for us. Usually 6 months after the end of a year, we'll get our numbers from the FBI saying these are your crime numbers. How that is reported is we report our numbers to the state of Wisconsin. Our records division ladies are trained in classifying cases and crimes. very specific definitions of certain crimes. So they will classify a crime, submit it to the State Department of Justice, and then the State Department of Justice will actually come back and they will review our cases, random cases, and audit us every year. There are very strict guidelines. If we violate any of those guidelines, there are some serious sanctions, including they can take away grant funding, or they can actually come in and do oversight and take over our reporting, which is very rare, but it has happened in the past. I have no input in what our crime reporting is. I intentionally do that, and most chiefs intentionally do that. I leave that to my record staff. That's what their job is. And there really is nothing good that can come of a chief dabbling in the crime reporting numbers. I've just seen some historically in the past, many years ago, other agencies, there's been some manipulation in numbers. And if I don't know anything about it and can't touch it, then I think it adds to the clarity and the validity of the numbers. So this is our, going back 25 years, these are numbers of our violent crime and property crimes in just the city of Appleton. So if you go up on top of the screen, our violent crime total numbers. This column is our total number of violent crimes for the year, for each year. A violent crime is classified as either murder, justifiable homicide, rape, robbery, or aggravated assault. So those are the 4 crimes that nationwide the FBI looks at to come up with your violent crime rate. And that is so that we are consistent across the entire country on violent crime rates and numbers when we compare ourselves to other jurisdictions. So if you go back to say 1997, we have a total of 69 violent crimes. If you fast forward to 2007, it's 146. 2017, it's 203. So you can see a steady increase in our violent crime numbers. We also do a 5-year average. So the 5-year average for the 5 years ending in 2003, our violent crime rate was 122. Sorry about that, 122.4. The next 5 years, it was 164. 5 years after that was 195. 5 years after that, it leveled off, 194. 2019, it went up a bit to 214. And 2020, we had a lower year. I'm sure COVID had a little bit to do with that, but was 170. If you look at the majority of our crimes, violent crimes, by far the largest numbers are aggravated assaults. You can see here, if we just go down to the last 5-year average here, our aggravated assaults, 143 of our 194 violent crimes on average were aggravated assaults. That is by far our most popular, if you will, violent crime. Over 50% of those aggravated assaults are domestic violence. That is domestic violence arrest, either husband, wife, adults living together, being arrested for an aggravated assault. An aggravated assault is a charge where there is maybe someone is unconscious, somebody receives stitches, they break a bone. So it's a serious battery is what an aggravated assault is. So those numbers, again, have been pretty consistent the last 10 years. If you move over to the blue numbers, that's where we see our significant drop in our crime rate. Our property crime totals have been dropping probably since the mid 2000s. If you can see, our property crime total here is 2,200 in the year that ended 2008. And 5 years later, it drops down to 1,552. And 5 years later, it's down to 1,245. So when we say that our crime rate is dropping in Appleton, it is dropping in Appleton, but it is strictly because of our property crimes. Property crimes, if you take a look at the numbers closer and we'll look at them, it's basically your burglary and your thefts that have gone down. People have gotten much more secure in how they take care of their properties and the residences. We have cameras. We have ring door cameras. There's surveillance systems that are fairly cheap now that a lot of people have. And stores. Shoplifting is down dramatically because of the surveillance technology that's in place now. There also has not been, we've worked with pawn shops a lot in the last 10 or 15 years where it's not beneficial for people to steal items and try to pawn them at a pawn shop because they know that they're going to get tracked and arrested. So we've seen a lot of reduction in the theft and burglary side of the crime rate, if you will, which has really brought down our crime numbers. So this is a little easier chart to see. The red is our violent crime rate on the bottom, and I'll get a little closer in on this in the next couple slides. You can see things picked up in the late 90s, but have been fairly steady since about 2001 when it comes to violent crime. The blue is our property crime rate. As you can see, it kind of it comes down. It spikes a little bit in 2004 to 2007, and then has been coming down dramatically since then. Now, how do we compare to the United States? Very similar when it comes to the violent crime rate in Wisconsin. But the United States crime rate has actually dropped significantly since the late 1980s, early 1990s. There's been a lot of different philosophies on this. If you remember back to these days, the mid 80s to the mid 90s, a lot of gang crimes, a lot of gang drug dealing and gang activity in our larger cities. Homicide rates in our large cities were dramatically higher than they are now, and it drove a lot of crime, which drove this number here, the United States violent crime rate, up until it spiked in, I think, around 92 or 93. And it has been dropping dramatically since nationwide. Wisconsin, it's kind of leveled off, as you can see here. Our violent crime rate is kind of leveled off. Again, this is our violent crime rate for Appleton, going back to the mid 90s. It has spiked a little bit. 2006 came down a little bit and then spiked again in 2011. Has been fairly steady since 2010, 2011. We are the third largest metropolitan area in the state of Wisconsin. So obviously Milwaukee is number one, Madison area and Dane County is number two, and Appleton and the Fox Cities is actually number three. Green Bay and Brown County is number four. Appleton is considered the third largest metro because we take everything from Oshkosh all the way to Kaukauna. It actually bumps us up to well over 300,000 people. Even though we're the third largest metropolitan area, we are currently the eighth in violent crime rate in cities that are over 20,000. And if you look at all cities in the state, we're number 22 in violent crime rate. So we have a very safe city when it comes to violent crime. Again, the majority of our violent crime is domestic violence related, and that is just the ones that are reported. We know that a lot of domestic violence crimes are never reported to us. But just counting the ones that are reported, it still is our highest violent crime that we have in the Fox Cities. There's a little closer look. If we just look at the last 14 years, you can kind of see a little bit of an uptick from 2009 to 12, and then just kind of a leveling off and coming down a little bit until 2020. So if we look at property crime, this is the thefts, burglaries, stolen vehicles, calls, and cases. You can see Wisconsin, which is the blue line here, pretty much mirrors what the United States is going back to the 1980s. Just a steady decline in property crimes. Ours is fairly similar. We had a bit of a bump in 2004, 2007 or 8. I think a lot of this is stolen autos. If you remember back to the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was just a rash of stolen vehicles, a lot of joyriding of especially Toyotas, Hondas, vehicles like that, where literally you could start them with a screwdriver, and every kid knew that, and that spiked a lot of our stolen cars. But then we've seen a steady decline since 2000, 2008, and I think the numbers are even lower in 2020 when we finally get those numbers. I think this will drop even more. Again, this is a little closer look using a 3-year trend line. Again, steady decrease in property crimes the last 12 years. Hate crimes. I want to talk about hate crimes because this is something that we track very closely. But I want the caveat to this is we know that hate crimes, domestic violence, and elder abuse are 3 most underreported crimes. These numbers that you see here are just the ones that were reported to us. We've had 9 hate crimes since 2015 reported to us. You can see the years listed. 2015, there was 3. Last year, there's 1 that's pending that we're investigating. 2019, there's 3. So we track each hate crime. We track the offender information. We track whether it's about what type of bias it is. Is it anti-Black, anti-gay, anti-disabled, anti-white, Jewish, multi-race? And we track all those. We report those separately to the State Department of Justice. It's a separate report that we do, and that is tracked also. I show you this because I want you to know how important it is to us. We take every one of these seriously. We investigate the one that we're looking at for 2020. We've got several detectives working that case and processing a lot of evidence that we're waiting for lab reports on. So that is one that we're still going to be working on. But it is a extremely underreported crime. I hope that our community partners, and I know our community partners out there with Celebrate Diversity, Casa Hispana, African Heritage, Diverse and Resilient, I hope that our citizens that are victimized feel safe going to them if they don't feel safe coming to us, and reporting their crimes to those people and then having them contact us if they're comfortable doing that, because we need everyone reported. We need everyone investigated and everyone charged. So that's our information on hate crimes. I'm going to get a little bit into how we track crimes and some database. Does anybody have any questions on what I've gone through so far?
Hello.
Yep, go ahead, Irma.
Yes, sorry I can't show my video for whatever reason. I'm not able. The question I have is, is there seasonality in the violent crimes, or is it pretty consistent? Do we see any correlation with events and such?
No, it's pretty consistent. Again, most of it is driven by domestic violence, which again is year round. It's not real seasonal, as you know. So no, we don't see an uptick in certain times of the year or certain days of the week. I used to work in Green Bay for many years, and and it was true. We used to dread the Packer game losses because we knew that there would be domestic calls that evening, and whether it was accurate or not, we could definitely sense it. But we don't have that here. I think it's consistent year round as far as the violent crime, whether it's robbery, sexual assault, or the aggravated assault.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chief, I have a question. Oh,
go ahead, Martha.
Okay. I know you said domestic violence is your highest part of your aggravated assaults.
Mm-hmm.
I know Harbor House has some good education out there that they're rolling into the schools, or maybe already have them in the schools. Do your SROs work with that education at all in the schools, or is it probably mainly just left up to the teachers, or is there any collaboration there, I guess?
I know the SROs work with the schools. I'm not sure if they work specifically with Harbor House's project that they have. I know Lori Dubin does. Lori's our new victim service officer. She's our domestic violence. She's been our domestic violence liaison officer for years, much like Carrie Peters is our refugee liaison officer. But I know Lori does. But I'm going to have to check about that, Martha, and I will get back to you though.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, hello, Chief. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, this is Dimitri. I want to ask you, because I see a lot of data here. One of the things I want to ask is about what are you doing with this data? You're reporting so much about the crimes, but now the question is, because for the past 10 years, based on what we can see here, it looks like the violent crime remain consistent. So, but what are you doing with those data? Are you negotiating or collaborating with other organizations to bring those crime down? Or what are you doing with those data, basically?
Right. Yes, we are part of several community coordinated response teams when it comes to sexual assault. So we work with a lot of different providers in Calumet, Winnebago, and Outagamie County to work on the prevention and the enforcement part when it comes to sexual assault and domestic violence. Like I mentioned, Lori Dubin has been working with the Domestic Violence Center and Harbor House for many years, trying to liaison with them and build relationships with them. She's also reached out to Diverse and Resilient and has started to work as a liaison for them with any of their clients that may feel more comfortable coming to her than coming to Diverse and Resilient than coming to law enforcement. So we also look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Archie. Why do you think the crime hasn't gone down, especially from getting consistent, at least it's about 170 plus for the past 10 years. But the question is, why are they not going down or engaging with other organizations? Do you think there should be a change of mechanism or techniques that you have to use to bring down the rate?
Well, I think Martha said something really important. It's getting into the schools and working with kids at a younger age, especially when it comes to domestic violence. We just added that victim service officer position this last year, like I mentioned, I think in the last session. And part of Lori's job is going to be to identify those opportunities of working with victims so that we can get closer to the victims and their families and try to prevent the generational repeat of domestic violence. I think economics, has a lot to do with it also. I think we talk about the core issues of what causes crime, and that's a whole different topic that we could probably get somebody a lot smarter than me in here to talk about. But the core issues of crime so often come down to opportunity, economics, family structure, educational access, racism and bias. All those things play into the core issues of crime and the lack of opportunity. And so I think, the more work we can do with our SROs, engaging kids, trying to keep them out of the criminal justice system and then connecting them with services, I think is tremendously important. Like I said, I'll echo what Martha says. I think our schools are there's a lot of opportunity. I know they do a lot already, and it's hard putting more on their plate than they already have, because education is what schools are for, but it also is a place that we can go and we can do a lot of preventative and educational work at a young age. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, sorry, my last question. Thanks, Chief. Sorry, I'm just thinking around what you just said, because if it is possible that the crime remain consistent, especially when they're violent, if it is possible that probably maybe influx of resources from the team, from people who can get employed, who wants employment, uh, let them go into it and just create organizations, set up a non-profit organization to solve this kind of issues. I don't know, but I'm just thinking probably maybe if recruitment opportunities are out there for those who can help out to solve these problems, maybe there is something we can do about that. So that is one thing that I'm just thinking about, because we have to look at why is it consistent? Why can't we bring it down? And that is one. And then the second one, my last question is, I didn't see the demographics here in terms of whether it's Black, Hispanic, or who committed the crime. Is this something that you don't want to share, or what?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question there.
The demographics. Sorry, I don't know if maybe I'm having problems with this. You hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
yes, much better. Thanks.
Is it clear now?
Yes, it's very clear. Yep.
Um,
Go ahead.
can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
No, I can't.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, try again. Try again.
Yeah, my question is, do you have demographics of those who committed the crimes?
Yes. Yeah, we can do a breakdown on as far as arrest and offender data.
Yeah.
Yes. No, we can do that. And that could be a topic for a whole nother session if that is something that the committee would like to see. It would take a little while to put it together, but I've got some of that stuff already, some of those numbers already.
All right. Because I think if we look at the demographics, probably maybe that could help us to understand what is going on, and then which demographic is having a problem here, so that it can be treated, can be addressed quickly. That is just my understanding.
Okay.
That's all that I have. Sorry.
Okay. No, and we've got that information, so I'll be able to report out on that. Maybe one of the upcoming sessions, arrest and offender data. I've got Appleton's, obviously. That's something that I've reviewed, every year. We take a look at that. But I also would take a little bit of work, but I could get the states for comparison. And if that's something that we want to report out as a topic, I can probably put that together for one of the upcoming sessions.
Yeah, at least we can ask the team as well.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Anybody?
Thomas?
Go ahead, Amy.
Can I just mention that as a teacher, the discussion about putting how do we get education in the schools, and the thought of how do we get curricular alignment with discussion on domestic abuse? So I know that our health teachers, oftentimes they have a unit on healthy relationships, and they have a collaboration with Harbor House that comes in and talks about that. Right. And a lot of our service groups like National Honor Society and Key Club and DECA that does volunteering at Harbor House, right, will have somebody from Harbor House come in, and before you can volunteer there, you have to do training. And that talks about what is a healthy relationship. So it doesn't necessarily align really closely with curriculum. It's very difficult to you teach biology. How do you get this in there? But there are ways that we're trying to get into the school in an authentic, original way, not pushing it where it doesn't belong. So I think there is exposure, but obviously there could be more, but to try to find the right fit is what's difficult.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, I know I know they've been getting into the schools. I wasn't sure exactly where and what programs they've been doing. Do you know the SRO is very involved with that? I don't believe they are, but I know there's been discussion in the past of them being more involved with that. I know we had talked about DECA becoming, our SROs working closer with a DECA on some projects. So.
Quick question, Chief. This is Irma again.
Okay.
I'm trying to find correlations in terms of domestic violence and maybe mental health or socioeconomics. You did mention socioeconomics, I believe, but are there correlations with socioeconomics and mental health issues, which drives me to, of course, healthcare?
Right. Yeah, I think we've all seen the studies. We've seen the data, especially in this last year. We talk about the access to mental health services for those low income or socioeconomically lower end of the scale, and how they don't have the resources. They don't have access to the resources. They don't know where to go to get the help. So I think that would be accurate to say. As far as domestic violence, and I'm sure there's mental health. We're starting to identify mental health much better than we were in the past, and using that to try to get people to the proper resources, whether they're a victim or maybe they've been arrested for a domestic violence offense, but there's a underlying mental health issue also that's been unaddressed. And we can keep arresting and putting them in jail for a domestic violence, but if the mental health need isn't satisfied or fixed, then it's the hamster wheel that they're on, and it's continually being in the criminal justice system over and over again. So I think we're doing much better on that in the last 10 to 15, 20 years, but I think we're still early on as far as identifying mental health and how it actually intersects with criminal behavior of domestic violence and all different offenses.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Laura. I think I saw Laura.
Yeah. So just to piggyback off of that, so I lived in Finland for 2 years when I was in high school for my dad's job. And a lot of their mental health and domestic abuse correlated to weather. And I know that we get not super similar, but I mean, they have like a super long, dark winter. Right. And I don't know if there's been any studies or any like data, I guess, for around here or even just Wisconsin in general about the mental health of like seasonal affective disorder and domestic abuse. Because I know a lot of what happened in Finland is people like they drink a lot in general, but they drink more so, I guess, in the darker months just because you can't go anywhere. It's so cold. But a lot of that was affected by weather as well. But that also led to the mental health of like a lot of suicides. Like Finland's one of the highest countries in the world. They have the highest numbers in domestic abuse and suicides.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I know we've got several people in our community that have that seasonal affected behavior disorder where they become manic in the late winter months. So, I'm sure that's accurate, and that has a lot to do with some of our crimes also. But again, it's that untapped. How do we identify the mental health issue and what level is it at that it's causing the criminal behavior or disruptive behavior? But I think we're still learning, and I think it's going to take us a while yet, but we're starting to get the right resources in place. I think back to when I was an officer on the road 20, 30 years ago, and our only tool was to arrest people and put them in jail. That was all we had. And I look at where we're at now, and we've come leaps and bounds, and we're understanding the importance of identifying that and pre-arrest diversion, not just pre-trial diversion, but before you even arrest them, diverting them and not even getting them involved in the criminal justice system if it's a mental health issue. We're doing much better in that, but we still have a ways to go. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Actually, I do.
Hey, Ben.
My question is if you're going to do this mental health piece, is it a one and done? And if it's going to be sustaining, how soon is this going to get started, and what steps are going to be taken to make sure it's available in schools in a user-friendly manner, so you don't have folks trying to say, "Oops, I can't find it." Oops, what?
Yep. No, I know what you're saying. Well, and that's why when we're putting this program together, it's not an APD program, and it's not a Allegheny County program. It's not a NEW mental health program. It's not a crisis center. It's a collaboration of a whole bunch of organizations coming together and taking a look at the problem and saying, this is how we've addressed this problem in the past. If we could break the mold, what would be the best way to address this problem for the consumer or for the citizen? And let's build that model, but let's do it incrementally so that we don't cause any harm. It's going to take involvement from municipal agencies, county agencies, and the public sector or the private sector to be able to make it work. But we're trying to create a program that is not only sustainable, but build it up in a way where it can't be easily dismantled. You know what I mean? A lot of projects that happen in a police department are projects that the chief at the time thinks is important or believes is important. So they stand up a project. And then when the chief retires or that administration leaves after 5, 6, 7 years, a new chief comes in and they have a different vision. And then that project goes away and they move on to what their project is. The goal is to create something that is a community program and project, not run by one organization or managed by a police department or a sheriff's department, but a collaboration between all these groups that is going to provide the best service so that it's, number one, it's sustainable. Number two, we have the framework in place that we can easily grow it out. So it may start as a pilot in one area, but we want to be able to, I envision as it growing out like a spider web. Once we get a pilot in place and the framework set and we prove the success of it, then it's easy where everybody's going to want to grow and be part of it. You know, we saw this with, go back to, Karen Nelson and her old position as diversity, inclusion, and equity coordinator. That was started in Appleton many, many years ago. But now you see Allegheny County has put out a job announcement that they're going to hire one. Brown County is hiring one. Green Bay is hiring one. Oshkosh is hiring. The success was proven here, and now it is just spiderwebbed out and expanded across the state. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at with this program, Ben. I'm excited. I don't have many years left, but I'm going to be excited to sit back and watch and see how this really changes policing. Anybody else have any comments on that? Or I'll jump into this. So this is our Comstat Dashboard. So this is how we track our cases and crimes. This is part of our records management system. So there's a lot of different tabs up here. But basically how we use this is I can go into this database, and if I want to compare the type of crimes we've had in the last 30 days to the 30 days before that, I can take a look at this. It'll chart the crimes for me to show me if we're seeing an uptick in certain crimes or a reduction in certain crimes. I can go back and do a 7-day if I want to do a week-to-week evaluation or comparison. If I want to go to a year-to-date, I want to see where we are this year compared to where we were last year at this time. I can show that last year at this time we had 157 assaults, and this year so far we've had 117. Our burglaries have dropped about a half from last year. I would say that's probably because of that really, really cold spell that we had for a few weeks there. Drug equipment arrests are about the same. Drugs a little bit more, but not much. Frauds are down. Larcenies are down. Motor vehicle thefts are about a half. Significant increase in robberies. And if I want to look at robberies and say, well, why do we have 5 robberies? I can just go down and click on this robberies tab here. And it'll show me all 5 of the robberies. So I can look at each robbery and I can look for a pattern of either the address or the location. I can click on this button here. I won't do it because it'll give me details that I can't show you, but it'll give me the actual report that I can review and take a look at the pattern for that. So we use this, our officers, command staff, captains will use some of this data to look for patterns. I just wanted to show you that there is actually a public facing database. It does not have all the details and the names in it, but there is a public facing database that you can go to our website, the City of Appleton website, and you can click on a link for crime data, and you can have something very similar to this come up, and you can do some of the same searches, and it'll show you, you can even map it and show like where the thefts occurring, where the disturbances occurring, and look for things that are happening in your neighborhood. So I just wanted to give you a look at that, how we track our patterns, how we identify patterns, and that there is a public facing database that everybody can have access to. You have access to now.
Chief, again, a question on the sex offense. The numbers appear to be extremely low. And I am assuming, hypothetically, I have no facts, but it probably is underreported.
Yes.
And since your team is looking for patterns and understanding that it is underreported, do we work with perhaps social services to get a more accurate perspective of what's happening in that lay of the land?
Right. Yeah, we are part of the Community Coordinated Response Team, the CCR team. And that involves, like I mentioned before, that involves county service providers, Harbor House, and other service providers. And they talk about our response to those crimes and different patterns.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about different prevention programs that they're involved in. So there is that collaboration and communication, but it is, you're right. It is it's hard to get a pattern on something that is underreported.
Mm-hmm.
And so we only have the data that we have to go on.
Sure. Thank you.
Yep. So future crimes and challenges, this isn't a surprise to anybody, but these are really the things that we're seeing in the next 5 to 10 years. White collar financial crimes, we know that's going to continue to grow. We already have several investigators that's basically all they do, and they are overwhelmed with work. Kind of tied into that is our internet crimes, especially trafficking. We know that this is going to continue to grow. Sadly, it is a little bit like a game of whack-a-mole. They'll have a process, and they'll set up a website or a database on the web that they'll use. Law enforcement will identify it, will track it down, will shut it down, and then they'll pop up somewhere else on the web. So that is something that we are very involved with. Our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, we are part of the state ICAC task force, and do a lot of work on internet crimes, especially the crimes of trafficking. A huge area that we are just starting to see the tip of the iceberg on is abuse in later life, or elder abuse. We are one of 4 project sites that were identified by State Department of Justice. Then in 2050, believe it or not, the population that are 65 or older will have doubled from what it is now. We know already that it is critically underreported, the neglect and abuse, financial abuse of elders in our community. The statistic I've got there was it's right from the state. For every case that we get reported to us, there's probably 24 that are not reported. And that is, when you think that our elderly population is going to double in the next 30 years, that's pretty scary. So that is an area that we have focused on. Like I said, we've been identified as one of the 4 project sites. So again, one of our cops, Sergeant Kerry Peters, is actually a trainer in preventing and educating other officers on investigating elder abuse. So we have been having our staff go through training sessions on identifying and intervening in elder abuse. Kerry is one of the trainers, along with the district attorney's office and some other trainers. But our goal is to have at least 75% of our staff go through that training by the end of the year. So that's where I see some of our future challenges. I'm going to go through just these next few slides pretty quickly here and then get to a roundtable. So just so you know how we staff our resources and where we put our officers, we do it geographically by level of service and calls for service. The number of officers that we have in the department is really, it hasn't changed a lot in the last 20 some years. But as you see, our crime volume and crime rate has dropped overall, even though it's leveled off with violent crimes, but there hasn't been a demand from the community to add officers. We would love to have more officers. The more officers we have, the more we can do. But we also know that for every officer you hire, that means there's probably another city employee or city department that's going to lose an employee, just because of the laws that are in place now with the tax levy. So we try to balance out how we deploy our officers by both time of day and location in the city. Just as an example, this is a heat map of 2019, our total calls for service. These are all our calls for service by the hour. Like this is midnight to 1 a.m. on Monday. Top line is midnight to 1 a.m. Second one is 1 to 2 a.m. The red is our busiest time. Orange is a little less busy, and the green is our lowest call volume. So you can see our busiest time is always usually starts off around 11 o'clock. The call volume picks up Monday to Friday. It really gets busier after 3 o'clock and starts to settle down a little bit by 8 or 9 o'clock. These are total calls. So while the call volume might get lower after 9 or 10 o'clock during a weekday, many of those calls are not one officer calls. Many of them are disturbance calls or calls to for domestic disturbances, several officer calls. So while the call number may be lower, it doesn't mean the need for the number of officers working is lower. That's why we have to look at multiple different metrics to decide where we put our officers. Busiest hour for 2019 was 3 to 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. That was the busiest hour for us. As you can see, Friday nights were a little busier, obviously going into Saturday morning, and Saturday night, usually starting around 6 o'clock, was our busiest time until Sunday morning or about 3 o'clock, where things really settle down. And again, that's the bars, the taverns, those calls for service. So that's kind of, a snapshot of what we look at when we look at calls for service. Here's another graph. Each one of these lines is a year, and the bottom is the hour of the day. So left, starting from midnight, you can see call volume is pretty steady, and it drops dramatically after bars close about 2 or 3 o'clock. And it starts picking up during the day and spikes usually at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. This yellow line is actually our staffing number. Again, it's in a ratio so that we can fit them on the same graph. But again, the staffing stays fairly consistent till about 3 o'clock. Then when the calls drop off, our staffing numbers drop down, and they stay down until they start picking up around 8 or 9 o'clock when the call volume picks up. And then they pick up again around 3 o'clock when the call volume picks up and stays fairly consistent. So that's how we staff. Again, according to calls for service and the need. This next one is what we really look at when we determine staffing requirements. There is a formula that goes into play, and some of this is subjective, but there's a belief that if a police officer has 60% of their time where they're busy on a call, doing a report, doing an investigation where they're busy and not available. If they have 60% of their time where they're busy and not free to do proactive work, that they've just become a reactive officer, which means they just bounce from call to call to call. So our goal is to make sure that they have less than 60% of their time busy. Ideally, 50% would be better for us. That would be our goal. I'd like to have them have 50% of their time where they're working a call, working a case, doing an investigation, and 50% of their time where they're available to do community policing work and the soft policing that we'd like them to spend time doing. So this is a graph chart that we put together for one of our work groups. We have two work groups, a red group and a blue group, and they're both fairly consistent with the time. So you can see our day shift, which is our 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. start. Those officers generally work 12-hour shifts. So a 7 a.m. is a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift. 9 is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. About 50%, 7% of their time they're on calls. So they're getting very close to that 60%, and they're over that 50% ideal. So they only have about 43% of their time available to do proactive crime prevention screens, crime prevention calls, community policing type of activities, the proactive work that we want them doing. Our afternoon shift, that's 1500, that's 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. A little less busy. They have 52% of their time busy, and 48% is available. So it's a little closer to the 50-50 that we're looking for. And then our overnight shift, which is our 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. They're about 50-50. Again, they have a lot of quiet time after that 3 a.m., especially on the weekdays when everything closes down. So that helps build up their available time. But this is kind of where we want everyone to be, kind of a 50-50 split. So if you look at all our shifts together, right now we're at about 54% of their time busy, 46% available. So it's not to the 60% range where we need to be, where I think we're at critical. It's a critical issue for staffing, but we're not quite where we want to be at 50-50. If that helps explain a little bit about staffing and needs. So I didn't get any other questions or requests, so I've opened it up now if anybody has any requests, or if there's anything like Tamara had asked that you'd like me to cover a little more in depth with these numbers or look into a little more. I'm going to add a PowerPoint here so I can. All right, I got everybody back now. All right, does anybody have any questions on what I went through or any request on what else they would like me to a little more detail on, dig a little more into?
Hey, Chief, it's Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, quick question for you, sir. When you're dealing with, say, a hate crime situation, and I cannot remember this from my schooling, so I'm just trying to refresh my brain. In the state statutes, if a crime is considered a hate crime, does it have an amplifier or a modifier on it that it is more of a severe penalty when it's gone to prosecution?
Yes, there's penalty enhancers for any hate crime, and we've charged those out in the past.
So when our officers would write us, so if they would write a citation, do they put that into the citation then, or is that determined then by the attorneys when they go to court on that situation? I can't recall.
Yeah, usually something we'll discuss with the prosecutor ahead of time, but the
Okay.
prosecutor would include it. Much like a domestic violence enhancer for a domestic violence arrest. It could be a disorderly conduct with a domestic violence enhancer.
Okay, so a D, I got you. So like a DC with it. Yep.
A battery with a hate crime enhancer.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Sure.
Chief, I have a question. It's Joy again. I actually have two questions that are not related. The first is for the domestic violence that you mentioned is a big percentage of the aggravated assault. Is Appleton's percentage of the domestic violence that makes up aggravated assault, is it similar to the national average, or do you have that information?
No, I don't have that. I should be able to find it though. There is a new website that Department of Justice came out with that tracks. See if we can find a link for you. But the State Department of Justice just came out with a domestic abuse database where you can actually go in and compare domestic abuse data from the state of Wisconsin, from across the state for different agencies. So I will, let's see if I can do this. Copy. I will send an email to all of you with that. I've looked in it before, so you can search by Outagamie County compared to other counties, other jurisdictions. But I'm not aware of anything nationwide. I'm sure it's out there. It would just take some time to look for.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then the second question, which relates to that one of the last slides you were showing us about wanting the officers to have time to be proactive rather than reactive. How many degrees of freedom do you have with what if you saw them going over the 60% without extra staffing? What would you actually be able to do about that?
We review it not as frequently as we like because it is very time consuming to pull those numbers out from the database, but we will adjust staffing as far as where we assign officers and the shifts we assign them on. So we see one of the things we did a couple of years ago is we did this analysis, a workload analysis, and the council, I asked for one officer, the council gave us 2 officers a few years ago, and we assigned them to a special patrol shift that covered where we identified our greatest need, where the officers had the least amount of discretionary time. We're the busiest, so we assigned those 2 officers there to kind of level that numbers out. So that's really our only response is try to either use technology to free up their time, which we've done a few things with, or assign the workload differently to even out the workload.
Chief, can you hear me?
Kanan, go ahead.
Yes. I got a quick question. Because I think about the reasons that I joined this group, and it was kind of because after the George Floyd killing, I kind of felt, this group was more so about getting the community together and gain trust within the Black community. So I guess my question is if we had even had a timeline on it, what changes is the Appleton Police Department doing to gain trust in the Black community?
Sure.
And we talked about more Black officers, recruiting more Black officers. We talked about possibly the 2 young activists that was charged with felonies. We talked about possibly dropping charges on them. And I'm wondering, where are we going with this group? What should the Black community expect out of this group? And how much longer should we have to wait to see any type of changes within the Black community and the police relations? Because it's a big trust thing. And we talked about that earlier, but the numbers are great, Chief. The numbers are great. But what true changes is really happening, and what should we expect to change?
Right.
That's my question.
No, I hear you, Kanan. Well, that's part of that Vision Fox Cities. I don't know if you're able to watch that or listen to it. I know a few of the people here did, but that is part of what their mission is trying to engage law enforcement and other community members in how do we make our city and our Fox, not just Appleton, but the entire Fox cities, make this more of a welcoming community where people feel like they're safe and they belong, if they are a member of either a racial minority or any other group that's been marginalized in the past. So that is part of what that group has been doing. The listening sessions was step one, with the community members that were involved in that are now putting together action steps on what we should do going forward. There's been a lot that's been done already. Again, when people say we need action, I need to know what action are we looking at and what exactly are we talking about specifically. If it's talking about building trust, well, that's what we're here trying to do with this group. That's what we're trying to do out in the community when we meet with community groups, either individually or as a group. That's what we're trying to do tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. I've got another panel discussion with a few chiefs in Neenah being hosted by KC. And the discussion is going to be about that. It's about how do we build trust in the community with all of our community members and those that are feeling like they trust us. So I had the 2-hour one last week. We have action steps coming out of this. We have this group where I'm trying to engage more community members. I'm willing, I've said this before, I'll come and meet and sit with anybody, even at your barbershop if you invite me, to talk about anything, to offer some truth and try to reconcile any issues. Cases that are in the courts, I have no comment on, and I can't and I won't. I'm not allowed to. Wouldn't be proper. So there's nothing I can do about those two incidents. I've got a laundry list of things we've done since George Floyd's murder on May 25th. We sent out our message right away to the community. Presented different topics to our safety and licensing committee on mental health and use of force. Was a panelist on a couple different truth and reconciliation meetings on June 2nd, June 18th. There's one at the Outer Edge in July. We formed this committee. We put out a community survey and asked the questions. Do you think we're doing enough for racial justice? And we took the responses back. With this board, I asked the board to tell me what you want us to report out on. What do you want me to report out on? What do you want me to explain to you? What do you want me to tell you about and what we do? I've had a couple other Zoom meetings with some other African-American groups on October 7th in town. Did presentation to a group in Oshkosh on community engagement, got feedback from them. Lawrence University hosted a community conversation with myself and the mayor and Karen Nelson, talking about safety in Appleton and what we can do to make things better. I presented to the Speaker Task Force on Racial Disparity. We talked to the Community Foundation, and we're starting to work on creating this crisis response team, which has been a lot of work by a lot of different community members, so that we can put together a plan and a response team that's going to work for everyone.
If I may add, though, Chief,
Yep.
I think one of the main ways to gain trust in the Black community is to treat the Black community as your own. Mm-hmm. And I feel as though, if your own child was protesting for that same cause, and he might have cursed at the police or did something like that, I don't think you would treat your child the same way. And I kind of feel offended about that. I know I don't mean to bog you down about it, but that's just a small gesture. I think that it's easy for you to help bring trust to the Black community. That's just my opinion, though.
And our approach, and I'm not going to get deep into it on this, Kanan. You can invite me to your shop and we can sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about it one-on-one. But our approach to all the protests were very congenial, and we took a very hands-off approach.
Can anyone hear me? Oh, okay, you can.
To ensure people had their rights to protest, and if people violated the law and either damage property or hurt people, then it is our job to enforce the law, and that's what we do, and the courts can decide how it gets resolved. But that is another issue that I think, again, we're not going to resolve that one here. All I can tell you is that we had dozens of protests with thousands of people downtown, and we only had to refer 8 people for charges, and none of them were arrested at the night of the incident that had happened. That we put cases together and they were reviewed by the district attorney for charges. So,
but they were the leaders, though.
Anybody else have any questions? Kanan, I'd love to talk to you offline about this.
I do. Sorry to interrupt you guys going back and forth. I do have a couple of things. Sorry, I went in and out of this meeting probably 25 times during this whole meeting because it would not let me speak, but now I got it figured out. So I'm wondering, along with so you were talking about the Imagine Fox Cities conversation about policing. So I was told by a couple community members that they were told that they could not either join the panel or ask certain questions because it was going to make the police officers uncomfortable, and that was not the reason for the meeting. So I'm wondering why, if we're trying to build trust within the community, can we not ask certain questions that would make the police officer uncomfortable when maybe I feel uncomfortable about something when me ask my question?
Yep. No, I have no idea where you got that from. I would, if that's what you're hearing from someone else, I would invite them to contact the people that ran that, and they can take that up with them. I have no idea if that's, I was on the panel.
I can definitely do that because my questions were also included. So I'll ask the person if they feel comfortable coming forward, but my questions were also included in the email. So I was copied into it, and I know that my questions were not asked, and the person came back and said that it was going to make police officers uncomfortable.
Okay, I've never been uncomfortable with any questions, so I'm not sure. You can ask me anything. But I'm not, again, that would be something that the people that were running that would have to answer.
Other than that, I kind of am coming from the same aspect of Kanan. How do we measure any positive outcomes from what we're doing here? How do we get down to maybe a level where we're not going through just every day about almost being talked to us, where we can more so talk together and work on things together rather than, is that how this a board goes, or?
Right, well, that's what I'm asking for, feedback and input, but there's, when we're open for any questions, any comments, any discussion. And I know that it is a sore topic. The individuals are arrested for the protest, but I also know that majority of people don't know and haven't seen the videos. And when something is in the court, I can't comment on it or disclose it or release any videos, or that's outside of my purview. And so I have to leave that alone for now. And
yeah, I'm not actually speaking about, I know how you feel about the cases that are going. I'm actually just speaking to what an advisory board does and what we should be working on together rather than just being educated about the police department. How can we get to a space where we're working on making something of any process?
Well, I think that one of the things is what I did by reaching out to try to get board members to volunteer to help guide and create this crisis response team. That's part of what we did. And so I'm hoping that, I know we have board members that are interested in being part of working on that. again, otherwise, I would open up to you and what suggestions and recommendations would you or anybody else on the board have?
Well, at the very least, I would think that when new processes are being taken up, like, for example, I remember a few months back, there was new camera equipment or high speed, some sort of equipment that runs license plates and stuff like that. Not saying that in specifically or in particular, but when new processes and new funding things are happening behind the scenes, are you going to be bringing that to this board so we can talk about it before any decisions are made?
Right. Yes. Just like I did with the crisis response team. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Chief, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
All right. Yeah. One thing that we discussed that I was asking you about is we have a list of crimes right now.
Right.
Now, what I suggested is it possible to list the organizations that are working to solve those problems? Then we want to understand if those organizations have volunteers or they need volunteers to support those. So any people or any person in this group can support those organizations. For instance, if we are talking about mental health issues for those who are committing batteries and some other issues like that, can we have the list of organizations working to support the police department to work on those? And then if we have those lists, I'm talking about the board should have those data. If they have those data and they have the organization supporting those, they can probably maybe reach out, or maybe you can reach out to them if they need more volunteers to support. That would really help. But right now, I don't think we have the data. We have some other school people. You mentioned the CSO working to support, but I don't think we have the holistic view of which organization are actually working with you to support and bring this crime rate down.
Yes, no, I can get together a list of all the organizations working on specific issues, and then I can get that out to everybody so they can.
Yeah,
I can do
thank
that.
you. So that is one. Then the second one is the numbers of crimes that we are seeing. Can we bring it down? Can we break it down by demographics?
Yeah.
So that probably maybe that could be something that the teams wants to talk about, and then probably maybe we can look at where the epidemic is, so that we can address those issues. Is it from the Black community? Is it from the Hispanic community? Is it from the white community? And can we address those based on that? And I think that will give us more information on what we can do.
Yes, yep, absolutely. So the next session we had scheduled for training and equipment. So we could talk about that, and then we can do demographics and crime either attached to that or a different night, depending on how much time it takes.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, we can do that next session.
Thank you, Chief.
Surely.
I'd like to voice an idea because I hear Kane, I hear Kristen, I hear also the desire of our group to want to do more than what we're doing right now. And first, I would like to say, firstly, Chief, thank you so much for creating this platform, because if we didn't have this platform, we wouldn't have these the voice to be able to share at least our desire to do more. So I think it is a great beginning for us to start thinking about how can we contribute more and better, because ultimately we're all trying to want to solve problems. Right. So here's the suggestion I have. As I heard, for example, Kane, who I feel, Kane, and again, if I'm putting words in your mouth, please forgive me, but somewhere, somehow, the voice and the problem is not being heard. And I'm not saying this is from your team, Chief. I think that the problem is complex, and it is very difficult for us to solve everything in this once a month meeting that we're having. So the suggestion I have is is there an opportunity for us, if we really want to be more active as a community, is there a possibility to have subcommittees and then work together to identify the specific problems we really want to solve, and then come to these meetings as we partner with Chief Thomas and be able to really identify. First, we need to identify the problem specifically. What is really the problem? Because talking broadly, we're not going to solve it. But specifically, as we break it down and we're able to articulate the problem, the 4-step problem solving, and come up with recommendations and bring it to the chief, I think we're going to start making progress, because I really wholeheartedly see and hear from everyone in this group wanting to do something more. So that would be my suggestion. I mean, I raise my hand. I would love to sit down with whomever and really identify the problems before our next meeting. And maybe that's the first thing we do, you know. And I'm willing to meet more often behind the scenes before this meeting, but really wholeheartedly come together, be authentic, real, and converse. Let's talk about what is the problem.
Right.
Thank you, Irma, because that's exactly, in so many wonderful words that you just said, that's exactly where my heart is as well. And I think that if we can get down to working on like projects or like something more to a granular level of things to actually address what we need to work on and work on that. And it might not be just always as our whole group, because there's so many voices and smaller groups.
Yep. Because I mean, in all authenticity here, I am delighted that, you know, the chief and the police family has created this platform to give us voices and to give us a platform to do something. And I agree with you guys that what has happened, but it's okay, because this is a progression. We're evolving. And what has happened is the chief has shared the rigor they have, the tracking and their policies, procedures, et cetera, which is excellent. And this is an evolution. So I think that maybe we're at a point where, you know, we've been doing this for a couple of months. It is perfect. We're evolving. So maybe we need to be a little more proactive. So again, Kristen, if you are interested, Kanan, anyone.
Yes, Irma, if I can add, thank you so much for your comment as well. And I think this is very important, because what we going up against, to be perfectly honest, in my opinion, is systematic racism. And it's not just in the police department, it's in the school district. So we got to go from one to the other, the school district. We got to go to employers.
Yes.
You know, it's like the same problem across the board. And this can be the perfect platform to where we started here and we show everybody else how it's done across the board.
I love it. Yes, I agree with you, Kanan. Absolutely. So
what are some suggestions for next steps then? Do we have a group that wants to get together and?
Well, I think the easiest way for us to connect would be, I mean, you send out an email to everybody on there. Anybody who wants to be involved with this can just do a reply with their personal email. That way, anybody who doesn't want to be involved isn't putting their email out there for everybody else. But I'm not the most savvy with computers, but I'm thinking if we reply all on that with your email, I mean, we'd be able to put together a whole list of people that would be willing to be involved.
Well, again, what I guess I'm looking for a framework of what is the problem that we want people to come together to try to come up with ideas on improving relationships, community engagement between police department or an African American community, or is it bigger look at systemic racism and law enforcement.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. This is Ben. Thanks, Martha, for sending me the link. But I wonder, I really like the idea Irma came up with of subcommittees. And then I think we just need to identify what those subcommittees are, and that can be one part of this. Another part is I think that what we've been doing with the education stuff is really good because it kind of pulls back the curtain. So that's part of building trust is seeing how it works. So we can say, no, this is why Appleton police do it how they do it. And it makes sense, you know. Now, is it the best way? Maybe, maybe not, but we can see it and that's someplace to build off of. And you know, so I think subcommittees is one thing. Another thing that might be helpful with these meetings is if we have like there's some issue, let's say we're talking about training or whatever next time, is there some issue with that you would like the committee's input on? And if so, is that something that, you know, we have the roundtable, but maybe instead of a subcommittee that does it at that meeting, we can break out into smaller groups, answer that question, and then kind of present to you. And one thing, I don't know how this is going to work for everybody or what your protocols are, Chief, but I think one thing that might facilitate that is, if possible, getting off of Zoom and doing these in person. I don't know what everyone's comfort level is, but this is it's difficult for those kinds of ways.
Yeah, it is. That's a huge hurdle. You're right, Ben. But unfortunately, I think we're stuck doing this for a few more months. The light's at the end of the tunnel, that's for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, Chief. Again, I think one of the things, based on what the team is saying, I think we need to identify the projects. That is why I was actually discussing about the crime with you and said, who are those people fixing them? Who are those people bringing those crime rate down? So we need to identify the projects that we want to discuss. I don't think that should be a major problem. Everybody knows what the problem is here in terms of racial equity in the workplace, crime rates, crime issues, and some other marginalization issues that a lot of people are facing. We can list those, and then we can divide people based on those groups and then into those projects. If you want to work in those projects, just assign yourself to those groups, and then that should be easier for us to focus on. They come to present it to the wider group after the discussion.
Well, my worry about that is racial profiling. That's one thing that comes to my mind right away. Well, would that increase racial profiling?
How? Okay, I don't understand. So can you expatiate on that, Kenan?
Yes, I just think if we focus on the demographics, we might come up with one or two things. Either we'll come up with racial profiling, or we'll come up with I don't know. I just see racial profiling.
To me, let me say this, guys. I'm working on a project that is affecting Black community right now, which is basically racial issues in the workplace. They don't accept, they don't give a hoot of those people who are coming to the workplace. Black community are not involved in recruitment. When it comes to, if you look at the, what's it called now, the Atagami, maybe one or two Blacks there. That, to me, I think that's a major problem. Employment issues for the Black community, that is one. So to me, from my own perspective, I think that is one of the challenges. And when you ask the employers, why are they not bringing them? They said, okay, they don't have access to reach out to them. They don't get their resumes and things like that. We need to discuss about that. How can this board help us to achieve those goals? That is one. So I understand where you're coming from, Kenan, but I think we shouldn't be shy about it. We have to just treat it. If it is racial issues, let's talk about it. If it is something else, crime rate issues, let's talk about it. Like all these crime rates that Chief just mentioned, I want to see those people who are working to bring those rates down. I want to see those who are part of those communities that are solving those problems. Can we get some people from this board to work in those areas? This is how we can bring these problems down. This is how we can get into these issues and resolve them. So that is my thought process.
Yes, my brother. I completely agree with you. Like you said, and that's what I brought up at the very first meeting. We need to figure out how to get more Black police officers. We got to, I don't know how, I heard the chief say before, it's a test that they not willing to take or whatever the case. But I don't know the solution for sure, but I just know we need more Black officers in this city. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds a little bit like racial, or not racial, recruiting.
Recruiting, yeah.
Recruiting within the APD, and then also the mental health task force that you're starting, and then also building trust within the Black community, and also crime rate. That's what I'm hearing right now, but I think that there are more things that you add subcommittees to the list, but obviously you don't want to do too many at one time because there's only so many of us.
If you're going to talk about recruitment, you need to talk about retention, because it's easy. It's one thing to get people to come in. It's harder to stay in.
Especially now.
Yeah. Recruitment and retention. Yeah.
All right.
One thing I think that was talked about at one of the very first sessions was getting events out to the Black community. I think one of the examples brought up was National Night Out, and Kanan had said he had never heard of that before. So I think that's another topic, or topic that could be covered by a subcommittee too.
Yep, and that's something that we've, maybe Irma, you could talk about it because you're on that team, but that's something that grew out of the George Floyd murder. Is got a really long acronym, Irma. I never get it right, but it's the multiracial.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, the multiracial committee that we're part of. There are some other folks, I think, in this team, perhaps, that are part of that multiracial committee. Right. Yeah, I know. I can't get the acronym. It's something like
it's so long.
CCMGL, whatever. But nonetheless, there are so many great things happening in the community, and I think that we need to create the dots. And this multiracial committee has a specific mission, which is about communicating to minorities in a more effective and relevant manner. And so right now the focus is on that. But as I think about the subcommittees we are thinking of endeavoring in, I think that the topics, if somebody can take the lead, and I honestly don't mind doing that, but if somebody has the appetite to do it, more than welcome. If we can identify, like we just brainstormed very quickly, we talked about systemic racism, we talked about mental health, socioeconomic, and I'm going to bring in another one. It's educating the community. You can't do one without the other. It's educating, and I'm going to be politically incorrect. I don't know what that is, but we need to educate the white culture about differences but similarities, about how do we break those barriers? How do we break the barrier of fear, and those sorts of things? And it has to work all together. And that's why as we decide what are those subcommittee topics, I think that they need to be complementary to some extent if we really want to move the needles. And it's okay to focus on one thing, but then have that synchronized kind of approach.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know it's late, guys. And I'm sure, Chief, you're also very tired, but I would love if we had a next steps before we depart. I would love that personally.
Yep, I'm a big believer in that. And the first thing I'm going to do, Irma, when I'm done here is I'm going to go find what that acronym is because it's bugging me.
I can find it right now.
It's Tri-County Multicultural Communications Committee.
Yes.
And yeah, we're on that too. Demetri
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
yeah, we are all in partnership with that. But and we're talking about the other thing, Irma, that you were saying with, in so many words, it's culturally appropriate communication or education. That's kind of what they say, being culturally appropriate, which, I mean, that's what is needed for building trust within the Black community, because there's a barrier right there where it seems, you know, we all speak, you know, we're speaking English, but at the same time, there's still a cultural barrier where sometimes people get profiled because of behavior that just doesn't seem like someone else's behavior. So then that's at least one barrier that I know that I see.
All right.
But
I've got, it's almost 8 o'clock here. Action steps. I love that, Irma, action steps. My thoughts, somebody can come up with a better idea. My thoughts are, I send out an email to everyone listing at least these 4 projects, subcommittee, and ask for volunteers for subcommittees. One is recruitment and retention. The second one we've already really done. It's the mental health response team. I've got a list of volunteers for that again, so that's already done, basically. Building trust in the Black community, a subcommittee on that, and then one on our crime rates and crime, and what are we doing to address our crime rate. I would ask for any other ideas that people have that they think we should put a subcommittee together. Email me what that might be. And then I will, within the next couple of weeks, I'll give people some time to think about it, because some ideas might come into your head in the next few days. But then send me what your thoughts are on subcommittees. I will blast out an email with an entire list of the ideas I got, and then I'll get feedback from the committee. You tell me if it's too many subcommittees and what you think we should do, limit it to 2 or 3 or 4, and then ask for volunteers, and let the subcommittees focus on, you know, where they want to make an impact and what they want to change. Does that sound like a plan?
I think another thing that would be smart to do would be to lay out like what is the objective of this particular group. I understand, like, from my perspective, people want to do action, and a lot of times action costs money, and we don't have a budget. So we need to think about what, and it's called the advisory board. And my idea is that, like, well, he's going to give us things that he's thinking, he's going to run it past us, but we really don't have, I mean, to come to us before like spending money for us to put input on it. I really don't know that we're equipped to do that. That's not our area of expertise. It seemed like I thought was that that the chief and the police department is going to give information to this group of people, and then we were going to take that and disseminate it to our networks. Okay, and that would be the idea. So I mean, I love this idea of doing more. I hate having meetings and it feels like I haven't done anything to participate or make the world a better place.
Right.
I just don't know how, like, if we had a mission statement that would help us understand what can we do.
Yeah. No, and I can send that out. We did have something that we put out, but I can put it out again. But you're right, it is. We talked in the meeting, that forum that we had last week with Vision Fox Cities, about frustration, and especially when it comes to biases and systemic racism. There is just a lot of frustration because it just doesn't seem to change. And
if I may add, Chief, you know, when you think about building trust, it's just like anybody with a family member. Like, if I'm driving down the street, I'm Black, of course. I get pulled over because I'm missing my tail light. My tail light bulb went out. And the officer gives me a warning, or just says, you know, get that fixed, and I don't get a ticket. I'm gonna go to the shop and I'm gonna say, man, I met this nice officer today, and he pulled me over, but he told me fix my light, and I'm good. that goes a long way. It's just the little things, you know, it's the little things that shows the community that you're not a villain because your tail light was out. You're not a criminal because we're not finna search you for drugs because your tail light was out. You know, that's the type of stuff that I hear on a daily basis at the barbershop. And until I see that type of thing change, it's hard for me to understand with all of the numbers, with all of the spreadsheets, it's hard for me to understand that anything is truly changing.
Right.
Fair enough, Kanan. I want to interject on something that Amy, you brought up, and I completely understand the perspective you're coming from in terms of two things I heard, Amy, you can correct me as always. But the first thing I heard was there may be financial ramifications. And the second thing I heard by creating these subcommittees, etc. The second thing I heard, not everyone is going to be available, you know, to participate to subcommittees because obviously everybody is very busy. And the third thing I also heard was the mission. What is the mission of this advisory? And I just wanted to address those three things. One, from a financial perspective, I think that is financials should never be a driver in this case, never. Financials are just the fuel for the car. If we identify a problem, we should find the finances one way or another. But the second thing I want to address also as it relates to the mission, I'm sure we have a mission, but as we see, there is rich conversation going on here and people are wanting to engage to solve a problem. And there again, I hope that whatever the mission is specifically, because I can't remember it, I hope that we have cognitive and spiritual agility to be able to adjust and adapt, because we are living in a very agile society. We are living in a digital world. We are living in a very complex world, and we need that agility. And the third point I was making, so I said the mission, we talked about the finances, and I think the third point was if people don't have the time, I hope they know that it's okay. And that it doesn't mean you're not contributing to the committee. So I really want to, that's it, enough. Not talking anymore.
Sorry, Laura was raising her hands up. Laura, I saw you raising your hand. I just want to make sure that she was attended to as well.
It's fine. I'll just send an email.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Concern I have is, sorry, let me just jump in quick.
Go ahead, Ben.
I think we also got to look at what is our vision, because we need to look at, if we're going to have a mission, if we're going to have all these other things, we need a direction. And I know we have a few things lined up, but what is the vision of the Appleton Police Department? You know, I don't want it to just be, we're going to be nice to Black people. I want it to be like, these are lifelong or long-lasting things, not one and done, nothing trendy in that sense, because I feel like I'm afraid that this is going to be the flavor of the month club, and I don't want it to be seen as that. So whatever the investment is in, it's got to be 100% with all parties involved, whether from the Appleton Police Department or from other communities, school district, across the board. If we're going to say we're welcoming, it's got to be across the board. I mean, I don't know how else to say it.
No, you're right. Absolutely, 100%. And it's why it's got to be a community-wide discussion. I talked at that, again, the discussion we had last week. I talked about it's not just the words that you say, because we've been through these periods before where leaders, whether it's law enforcement or politicians, they say the right words. And sometimes it's not even the actions, because they'll do something like put together a group at a time to appease a certain group, or they'll do a project to appease a certain group, but their heart isn't in it. It's not coming from the heart. It's got to come from the heart. Even if it's an action and it doesn't come from the heart, it's not sustainable. So that's what we're trying to create here. I'm going to try. I've only got a couple years left at the most. But I am one of those guys, I'm leaving it all on the field. So I'm going to try to get stuff in place here that is sustainable and that is a framework that can't be dismantled easily before I leave. So that's kind of what I'm trying to accomplish here with this board. And I'm excited that you guys are interested in taking on more work. So subcommittees are a great idea. When Amy talked about money, it's an absolute issue with everything we do. But what I envision is if you come up with ideas on recruitment or retention and it costs us some money, we have a budget for that. If you come up with some ideas on how we can improve our relationship with the Black community and it costs us some money, I can guarantee you I'm going to find money for that. So money is kind of my job on this committee. So I would challenge you instead, if you're on one of these subcommittees, to think big. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I'm gonna, unless anybody's got anything else, it's about 5 minutes past my bedtime, actually. I want to send out, I appreciate this discussion, and Kane and Kristen, thank you guys really for bringing this forward. I appreciate it a lot. I'm going to put out that email with those ideas that you gave me already. You guys think about it, send me back some other ideas on what subcommittees you think we might have. And then I'll kick it back to you guys, and you guys can decide how many you want to have, which ones we should have, and who wants to be on them. So does that sound like a plan?
Yes, sir.
Nodding. So, all right. I appreciate it. Thank you guys. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.